Hello, good afternoon. Welcome everybody to our presentation on asking the right questions, user design experience for libraries. I'm Jamie Mochik with the Nicolay Federated Library System here in Green Bay. We're going to go ahead and get started right away. We have Aaron SCHMIDT, who is the principal of Influx Library User Experience Consulting, presenting today. And you're going to see a lot of slides. I promise you will get a copy of these. You'll also get a copy of the recording later today, so do not panic. And with that said, Aaron, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks for the intro, Jamie. Thanks to you all for being here today. Let's learn about user experience design in libraries. As Jamie said, she'll give you a copy of the slides. Also, if you go to my website, wrinflux.com/WVLS, there is a link to the slides with some other documents that I will be referencing during the presentation, and a link to a really great article that I hope you all will read. So yeah, check that out. A quick bit about me. Definitely don't want to belabor the point here, but just wanted to tell you some of the things that I do. I've done all sorts of jobs in libraries. Right now I'm an independent consultant and do design work for libraries, website design, service design, all sorts of interesting, cool stuff. My partner Man and I wrote a book about library website design. We wrote a book about holistic library design. I'll talk about this book briefly during the presentation. I write a column for Library Journal. I teach for the iSchool at San Jose State. Recently wrote a report for an academic library. So one of the great things about UX design is it applies across the board to public libraries, academic libraries, all sorts of libraries. So we're helping this library in New Jersey do some visioning for what they want to be in the future. Last year, did a really cool project with the Chapel Hill Public Library, revisioning their space and services, all sorts of UX projects, as you can see here. Redid their website as well. We're pretty happy with it, so check out chapelhillpubliclibrary.org for a cool new website. One last thing that we do, we host about over 50 public library websites using a service that we have called Prefab. So it's a pre-designed library website template. It's really affordable for small and medium-sized libraries. It's like $1,500 for setup and training, and you can have a website based on WordPress. So that's one of the great things that we do. So that's just a bit about me and the types of things that I get up to in the library world these days. But let's talk about what we're doing here today. We've got this mission to support our communities. We can do this by making our libraries great, and today our actions for this is to learn a little bit about user experience and see some examples of great library user experience. Quick aside, I go to a lot of movies at this movie theater down the block from me in Portland, Historic Theater. Take a second to just think about, if you were in charge of this website, what kinds of stuff you would put on the homepage for the Hollywood Theater. I'm guessing what's coming to mind for you is things like showtimes, how to buy a ticket, calendar of events, stuff like that, right? That all makes sense. It's common sense. And I mention this to illustrate that this little nugget of anticipating the needs of people and making our services and products responsive to that. So if it wasn't a stretch for you to imagine that a movie theater might want to put their contact information, location, and ticket times on this homepage, you sort of understand this process of user experience design. It's not rocket science, but it can be tricky nonetheless. So here are some things that I want to cover during this presentation. So I'm using this term user experience. What exactly is it? Well, I want to say it's not just for technology. User experience design applies to all parts of the library, and it is certainly just not tech fixes. There is not a technology that we can buy to throw at these user experience problems. Here's a secret. It really boils down to oftentimes creating organizational change, and that can be tough, right? And importantly, it is not just customer service. So we're social creatures. The face-to-face interactions that we have impact our perceptions of an institution for sure. They can really make or break an experience, can't they? But there's more to the user experience than just the customer service. I like to think of user experience as applying good customer service principles to every aspect of the library. So signage, website, furniture, programs, all these things need to demonstrate the same principles we know have to apply to good face-to-face interactions. So all of these different touch points come together to inform and create a user experience for people. Quick example of how all these touch points can work in action. I needed to fly once from Chicago Midway to Toronto, and I heard that there were inexpensive flights on this airline called Porter. So I went to their website, and instantly I thought, oh, this looks a little bit different than other airline websites, right? So I bought a ticket, and indeed it was inexpensive, and it was easy to use their website. I got to Midway, and everyone was very friendly that I dealt with at Porter Airlines. The plane boarded on time. The plane was clean. They served me a beverage in an actual glass tumbler. They had a great in-flight magazine called the Journal of Porter Airlines. The flight did not crash. This is an important touch point for sure. On my return trip, they had a waiting area at the gate in Toronto, free Wi-Fi, free snacks. The Wi-Fi network was named Mr. Porter, which is the name of their little raccoon mascot that you see. All of these touch points were in perfect alignment to make traveling as pleasant as it could be. So they had considered all of these things and designed them accordingly. And this is, I think, what we need to be doing in libraries as well with all of our touch points. So I want to run through some slides quickly about why this is important for libraries and some problems that we have in libraries. We have a lot of moving parts in our buildings and on our websites. Here we have 13 steps. This is roughly what someone might do if they learn about a book in a library newsletter and place it on hold and pick it up at the library. There are a lot of distinct steps here, and there are a lot of different types of touch points too. We see something in print, we see something electronic, we see something physical stuff, we see a customer service interaction, number 12. So this is just one simple task that happens thousands and thousands of times throughout our libraries every day, right? So how can we get a grip on all this stuff to make sure that it's creating good experiences? Well, we have a systematic method for doing this, and oftentimes we don't. And I guess I don't need to convince you of this because you're here at this workshop, but just some examples because it's actually kind of fun to look at these interaction design problems in libraries. So here's one form of interaction design. This is designed for a reason, to prevent books from wandering off, right? Luckily, we've moved beyond this a little bit in our libraries, but this is a form of early interaction design in libraries. Here we have another one, one that we've moved beyond, thankfully. Here is another point of interaction design. Here are some old library cards. Now this is looking more modern and more familiar. A mean, ugly sign in libraries. And bet a few of you have something not too dissimilar from this in your library. More poor signage in libraries. This is like lowest common denominator stuff. Now, is this really going to make someone check out one of these books? I don't know. Here's another commonplace sign, anti-cell phone sign, but this is just stating something that's totally common sense. If you can talk, someone can hear you. This is an interesting thing. I was working with a library in Florida, beautiful 1920s Art Deco building, really neat building that was just filled with junk at this point. And they had all sorts of extraneous signage, including 4 of these signs that you could see from the entrance of the library. Here's a great one. There's definitely a story behind this that I would like to know. So here are all the signs someone found in their library. They took them down. Would you have a similar pile? What about this sign? Well, I made this one up, don't worry. But I made it up not because I hate babies, but because oftentimes when we have the red circle with a slash through it and a cell phone, we're trying to regulate a technology and we're trying to regulate a behavior. What we should be trying to do is regulate a behavior, not a technology. Babies can, on occasion, be annoying. It's true. But we would never throw babies out of the library just because they occasionally scream. Similarly, people do a lot of things on their cell phones besides be annoying. And when we have these anti-cell phone signs, I think it's just sending kind of a lame message. The language we use in our buildings is an important form of interaction design. Luckily, we've moved beyond cookery, and the official Library of Congress subject heading now is cooking. This is a small but important user experience victory, right? Our service desks, definitely a pet peeve of mine, the library reference desk fortress. So here we have a big one that is meant to separate library workers from the great unwashed masses, right? If you think of other scenarios, public institutions that have big desks separating people from workers, things that you will come up with include what? DMV, maybe banks, hospitals, places that maybe we shouldn't be trying to imitate or replicating their design dynamics. So I'm all for smaller reference desks. Here's one that's smaller but still tons of stuff on it that is blocking the view and not very collaborative here. This one's better, but boy, I sure hope they don't intend people to sit in that low chair while the librarian towers over them. Another big one. Now this is an interesting one to me because this is a cool looking desk, isn't it? I love the design and freshness of this. But to me, the functionality of this and this is exactly the same. The added value here is aesthetics, and that is something we shouldn't discount because our library should be cool looking, I think. But we can go deeper than this with design. We shouldn't just design wash this in terms of doing a shallow aesthetic redesign. We need to go deeper and make our desks more collaborative rather than this kind of us versus them dynamic we set up. Here's another example of design washing, I think, on this website. At first glance, this website looks cool, right? It's kind of neat looking. It's a little bit more modern. But there are some immediate problems that I see immediately. Number one, this is literally a library-centered design. Look at all the screen real estate the library logo takes up. Instead, there could be something there that's actually useful to library users rather than the library logo. There are other usability problems with this site that this homepage that I won't go into now, but just a quick reminder that creating a good user experience is definitely more than just aesthetic value. Here we have a promise, and here we have the reality. Sometimes these things don't match up, and I think there might be some design washing going on there too. The point with the service desk stuff is this: we haven't changed our service desks for the most part in a long time. They're kind of this, how they've always been. The way we are doing information and the way people do information has changed a lot, and I think we need to be mindful, and we have inherited furniture through, I guess, legacy that might not always be solving the problems that we need it to be solving. Okay, more interaction design stuff. Rules. We have rules in libraries sometimes. Do we need all of them? We need some of them, sure, but which can we cut to create a better experience? Talked a bit about websites earlier, but clearly our websites and they're a very important part of interaction design. Here we have a total library solution. This is so funny to me. I really understand the great intention here. The intention is, hey, libraries can be difficult to use. Let's teach people what we mean, what we're talking about. So this library has created a glossary on their website to help people navigate the library. This is a library-centered approach. What's the user-centered approach? The user-centered approach is, well, let's not use all this jargon. Let's talk like a regular Joe and communicate in a better way. Here's the kitchen sink approach to a library website where there are so many links it's hard to figure out what to do. And our OPACs, which oftentimes get conflated in the minds of our users. When you ask a user, hey, what do you do on the library website? They're going to say, oh, I place holds, I look for items. This is different than the way we think of our OPACs. We think of these things as separate from our website, but they think it's one and the same thing. At any rate, in this catalog, I've done a search for John Steinbeck, and I get no results. Boo. All of this library interaction design stuff became important to me when I was working a reference desk in a suburban Chicago library, and every day, multiple times a day, someone would ask me for a stapler, and I would turn to my desk, and I would get the stapler out of a drawer, and I would give it to them multiple times a day, every day. And finally, I said to myself, why don't we just have a stapler out on the desk, and everyone would be happier? And we made this change. We didn't lose any staplers. even if someone did steal our stapler every 6 months, really no big deal, cost of doing business, I think. Okay, so that interaction design stuff is fun, I think, and important for sure. But library user experience has more to say and has something even, I think, more important to say. And this is about the purpose. Like, what are we doing here? It has some stuff to do with our future. Let's look at what we've done in the past, and I think what we're doing for the most part currently. We're fulfilling our role to help our communities by being places of access to content and access to information. So whether it's books, whether it's databases that we just wish people would use more, we are fulfilling our mission by providing access to this information. And we have, in the past, helped solve the problem of information scarcity in our communities. This is a really important thing, and I think it still is. But there is sort of one problem with the problem of information scarcity. And the problem is, well, information just really isn't that scarce anymore, right? There's so much all over the place, all day, every day. So I think we're choosing to help our communities solve a somewhat outdated problem. Now, that doesn't apply across the board, and clearly we have access to stuff that not everyone does, and we shouldn't discount that. But I think we can do more. You might be saying, okay, Aaron, fine, we might provide access, but we do other things too. We do story time, we've got social experiences, and yes, I think that's fantastic. And all those programs and services, we should build upon them for sure. However, we are so linked with books. Every time OCLC asks people about the public library, people say, okay, public libraries are all about books. Now, that's fine, I guess. OCLC thinks this is a strategic advantage. I don't really think it is. Reading is changing, and I am not here to give a sky is falling type presentation because of ebooks. I don't think that's the case at all. At the very least, I think we can all agree that there are shifting sands when it comes to commercial content, and we are oftentimes heavily reliant on using commercial content in our libraries to get statistics, right? So this just presents a little bit of a red flag for me. A great confluence of interaction design and this content problem is found in this comic, Why Digital Rights Management Doesn't Work. This guy tried to download an audiobook from the Cleveland Public Library's website and was so perplexed about all the steps, he made a comic about it. Step 19, give up on stupid library. Not what we want to be, not the type of experience we want to be creating, right? Let's just pretend for a second that we had all sorts of resources and we could create something like this or something like this, but let's be honest, it would probably end up looking more like this. Should we double down on being a place of access to content? I don't think we really should. Number one, I think it's impossible in a certain sense to put ourselves in competition with these big players, but also when we do, we're just going to be copying what other people are doing. And this will put us a step behind always if we're just copying what is already out there. We can go deeper than that, and we can come up with more novel, unique, meaningful solutions to our communities. So when we are places of access to content, we're just trapped, I guess, in what Joan Fry-Williams has called the grocery store model of librarianship, where someone gets something in the library, goes home, uses it there, and that's the transaction. And I think we do more than that in libraries. What's more, we have some canaries in the coal mine as far as places of like repositories of physical content, right? And I think all this content stuff is unsustainable in the long run. We know that there's only one good kind of circulation statistic, and that's the one that is higher than the month before, right? If it's flatlining or going down, that's no good. And I get to work with a lot of libraries across the country. Most library systems and libraries I hear from say CircStat is kind of either slowly going down or flatlining. Very few CircStats are skyrocketing that I have found. Maybe it's different in your situation, and that would be great. Stories like this sort of freaked me out a little bit. Here we have a 24-hour automated, quote, library in Norman, Oklahoma. What's the problem with this library? There are no people. This, to me, is a great service. I love the idea of Redbox-style distribution robots throughout communities. That's great, but it's not a library. It's not the kind of library that I want us to have. So can we innovate our way out of this problem? I think we can, and I think we have some methodologies in user experience design to help us do this. For the past while, since the web has totally exploded in the past 10 or 15 years, we have had a sort of shallow version of innovation in my mind. We have waited for cool things to happen out on the web, cool new products to be available, and then use those in our libraries. Now that's great. We really should be using those tools, but we also need to increase our focus on people's motivations for using these tools, their ease of use, their sharing, and when we look at this stuff, we can find more natural fits, and we can go beyond just using the tools that are available to us. Now, great article that I have linked to in that web page I showed you earlier at the beginning is called What's a Library Worth? And I hope you all read it. It's a great article about library advocacy and library user experience, even though the author doesn't use either of those terms. But she forwards the notion that no library exists in a vacuum. Every library exists in an ecosystem. And instead of doing what's good for the library should turn outward and ask questions of their communities and do what's good for the host ecosystem. This has two benefits to the library. Because of how ecosystems work, if the library is improving the ecosystem, the library will be healthier too, right? Also, if the library is benefiting the host ecosystem, whether this is a town, village, academic library, whatever, school, the stakeholders in this ecosystem will support the library so it can continue doing its good work. So there are two benefits in this way of turning outward and listening to our communities. So who should be doing this work? I am a big advocate of cross-departmental user experience teams. This is a good way forward for a number of reasons. One, it can help with staff buy-in. It can give this user experience team a nice amount of library-wide knowledge. So consider forming up a team or a task force. Note that this is a, I guess there's some other word for a committee, but who likes the word committee, right? And have folks look at the library and start improving the user experience. So some good things for a cross-departmental user experience team to do. Now, this to me is the wrong question to ask our communities. What do you want from your library? This to me puts the onus on the library users to come up with solutions. And we know from all the OCLC surveys that people are just going to mainly talk about books. Maybe they'll talk about Wi-Fi. Maybe they'll talk about a coffee shop. Those things might be fine, but this is basically expecting people to design asking the community this question is essentially asking them to design the library for us. Now, I am all for co-creation in libraries, but in a more directed, systematic way. So in our surveys that we put out there and in focus groups, this to me is not the most productive question. Instead, we should be doing the design work. We need to realize that we are different from the people we are trying to serve, and we can learn about our differences, and in a sense, when we separate ourselves from them this way, we can get closer to them and design our services for them. Here's a holy trinity of library user experience. We should be creating products and services that are useful, usable, and desirable. These things are not mutually inclusive. Something can be very useful but not easy to use, right? So we need to be in the middle of this Venn diagram. I think when we're thinking about designing experiences in our libraries, we need to be thinking about approaching people and enticing people on an emotional level. So really interesting read from this neurobiologist. He tells a story of a guy who had a brain surgery and lost the ability to emote. He had no emotions. And an unexpected consequence, unexpected at the time, consequence of this was he could not make any choices because he had no emotions. Now he couldn't even choose what color pen to use. He just had no idea what to do, let alone anything higher level, like figuring out where to go for lunch or anything like that. So, we need to get people to actively choose the library. And we have the story that we tell ourselves that we're like highly rational creatures that go through this calculus of costs and benefits when we make choices, right? And that might be partially true, but there's this underlying emotional connection to making choices. And I think we can connect with people on a more emotional level to get them to become enthusiastic library supporters. So instead of just shouting at people with marketing and PR, which we should be doing, that stuff's necessary to be sure, we should be listening to them, learning about them, figuring out what they need, and designing the library accordingly. So great first task for everyone in your library is to go on some service safaris. What is a service safari? A service safari is an opportunity to go out any place and start systematically learning about and assessing and critiquing experiences that you're having. So I have 2 PDFs that you can download. One is a background document about why this is important stuff to do, and then one is a 4 or 5 page worksheet to help guide you learning about assessing and critiquing experiences. So you can see some of the questions there. I've had a lot of good feedback from libraries that have sent their staff out to museums, cafes, parks, grocery stores, taking a taxi, wherever, and having folks start to become analytical about critiquing experiences, coming back together and talking about experiences that they've had, not to just find stuff that they can implement in their library that they like, but just to develop a vocabulary for assessing experiences. This is important to get outside of the library because we have blinders on when we're in the same place day in, day out. It's impossible it's very hard to see our buildings with fresh eyes. And this helps develop these skills so we can apply them to the library. Once you up your analytical and critical skills, consider doing a user experience audit to figure out where you currently are with providing user experiences. So this book that I referenced earlier that we wrote, this is essentially a big checklist for determining what sort of experiences you're providing. And there's online stuff, there's physical building stuff, policies and customer service. You can use this book to go through your library. Each checkpoint, there's a little bit about why this checkpoint's important, how to assess it, how to improve your score if you're scoring lower than you want to be scoring. So I'm sure one library in your system probably has this book. You all should interlibrary loan it and go through this and assess what's going on at your library. Similarly, getting a fresh set of eyes on what's going on at your library is a really good idea. So if you have a neighboring library that you want to partner with, you go to their library, do some observations, invite them into your library, they can do some observations, and then you have a meeting afterwards and you discuss what everyone saw. This takes some trust, it takes some tact, but it's a really great way to get a fresh pair of eyes on your library, and highly encourage you to do it. So, central to improving the user experience is doing criticism. You've got to be critical and you've got to analyze what's going on. Of course, this does not mean that one should be rude or mean at all. In fact, criticism done that way is poorly executed, right? The name of the book, Jamie, is Useful, Usable, Desirable, Applying User Experience Design to Your Library, published by ALA Editions. So consider partnering up and talking about your experiences with someone else. Another good task for a cross-departmental UX team is to create a user experience vision document. Create a fictionalized, idealized version of your library. What sort of experiences do you want to create? If you can get this down on paper or video, however you want to create it, this can get everyone on the same page and make sure you're moving towards this common goal out in the future. So articulate what it is you want to do and what you want to improve and what sort of experiences you want to provide. This can culminate in a service pledge. Now, I don't necessarily think this needs to be a public-facing document, but if you can work with your staff to get a common understanding and an agreement about what sort of service your library should provide, this can be a great thing for staff training. It can be a great thing for onboarding staff to make sure everyone has a clear understanding of what it is, how it is the library should be delivering service. So one way that you can work on developing a service pledge is send out a survey to your staff and ask this question: what 3 words come to mind when you think about helping a library patron? And see what sorts of results you get. You'll get a lot of words like this. Interestingly, look at this first result. This is data that I assembled recently from about 100 libraries in a library system. And the first word was patience. This was a little bit of a red flag to me, and we had some discussions based on patience. So this gives a quick glimpse of what is on people's minds, and you should think about how this matches or doesn't match the service that you actually do want to provide. Okay, so those are some initial UX kind of ideas and some things you can do to assess and audit your library. What about this listening and learning about people? Well, there's a whole bunch of user research techniques that you can use to figure this out. One thing that you can do, and again, I've linked to this document on the page that you can download. Consider keeping a no log at your service points, and also record down anytime someone needs to be redirected to different spots to accomplish what they want to accomplish. This, if you collect this data for a few weeks and then compile it, and you can look for patterns, see what's on people's minds, and see what they're coming to service desks for, and see if you can streamline that process to make all of that easier. Let me just elaborate briefly on why patience concerns me. The word patience, the concept of patience, to me, makes it seem like a library worker is tolerating an annoying library user that they have to be patient with to help them, to provide service with them. Now, so there's just this little bit of friction or a little bit of negativity implied on the other end of this word patience in my mind. I mean, it's a great concept, but it kind of implies that library users are annoying, right? Maybe we can talk about that at the in the Q&A portion. But for now, yes, no logs. Consider doing this. It's easy to do. You can learn a lot about what people are not achieving at your library, and you can learn about why people are coming to your service points. Great user experience technique is usability testing. This is a technique for websites, but it's a great one. It's really easy to do. All you have to do is watch people use your website, and you can ask them to do some tasks and see where they trip up, where they're successful, and you'll always learn some things that you can change to improve your website. But one reason why I really like this technique is because it's simple to do, quick to do. You're always going to learn something, and in this, you can move the conversation from opinions to talking about data. Everyone in their role has an opinion about the library website, right? What should be on the home page, what color the link should be, et cetera, et cetera. And that's fine. Some opinions are better than others, I guess. But having bits of data to back up these opinions is invaluable. And if you can move discussions in your meetings about improving user experience to having verifiable data to back this up, well, that's a great thing. I highly recommend that all of you take time to go observe people using the library. So here we have a technique borrowed from the field of anthropology, contextual inquiry. Sit down, watch people use your self-check machines for half an hour. You do this, a few of your colleagues do it, you're going to learn a lot about how your self-check machines and the surrounding area are supporting or not supporting your library users. And that's just one example, right? It could be self-check machines, it could be photocopiers, it could be the lobby to your library, it could be the book returns, or whatever. Reserve judgment, just gather data about behavior, observe what people are doing, get together and discuss what you've seen, and maybe you can analyze and come up with some good solutions. So I was working with the Central Library in Mexico City, this really big, beautiful building, and on each floor in the corner they have this nice reading space. But this was the only time I saw this space being used as the designers intended it to be used. The rest of the time, people were using it like this. So there's something about the space that was not supporting the people in the way that they wanted to be supported. I think these spaces could be redesigned to better facilitate laptop use. Similarly, at Chapel Hill, all of their pick step stools are not used for getting items. They're used as a footrest throughout the library. What's up with that? You can learn a lot by walking around your library and seeing how people are behaving. Definitely, it's an essential technique for improving the user experience. Record all this stuff in spreadsheets, analyze the data, and you can learn a lot. So here we have some observations from the inner lobby at the Chapel Hill Public Library. We had people stand there for half an hour, record what they saw. We also did time-lapse videos. This is the technique that we're using more and more. So seeing a whole day's worth of behavior time-lapsed into 10 minutes can be interesting. Another technique for you. We ended up removing this huge circle desk and created small pods at the library, little service pods that are constantly evolving. So here's another way to ask the right questions. We shouldn't be asking people to design the libraries, and we need to be listening to people but not necessarily following their lead. So there's a quote attributed to Henry Ford. Turns out that he actually didn't say it, but it's a great quote anyway. He is alleged to have said, if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Right? They couldn't conceive of the automobile. They could just conceive of faster horses. And in this way, this is why surveys and focus groups leave me a little bit lukewarm. They are fine for assessing people's opinions and their stated behaviors, but people behave differently than the way, sometimes people behave differently than the way they say they will behave, and we need to be designing our libraries for actual behavior. You know, if you put out a survey and say, hey, when would you like the library open? It's really easy for people to say, oh, it would be great if the library was open till midnight and open at 6 a.m., right? I could go to the library after I go out to dinner and then go before work. But are people actually going to do that? Probably not, right? So there are different ways to get at that information. User interviews are another great way to learn about people. And luckily, we have experience doing something very similar to user interviews. That's the reference interview. User interviews are open-ended conversations that you can have with your community to learn about their lives. And if you do a quick audience segmentation and talk to, say, 10 new moms, 10 senior citizens, 10 working people, you can learn a lot about these groups and their lives, and you can dump all that data into what's called a persona document. Maybe a few of you have been involved with creating persona documents, but these are fictional representations of actual library users. And you can see there's a photo representing them. You give them a name. You can give them some demographic information. You tell a story about this person, essentially. And since they are representative of people that you actually talked to, you can then use these as guides for when you are planning new library programs and services. Another great technique that I hope you all will consider doing is that of journey mapping. So what I showed you earlier, this list, all these steps to place a hold on a book and get it in the library, is a very rudimentary journey map. Doesn't really need to be more complicated than this, though. So if there's something in your library you want to improve, make a map from a user's perspective of what they need to do to accomplish this task, and you can assess each step It can be as simple as just assigning a little emotion face next to it. How is the person feeling? Are they angry? Are they happy? Are they confused? Try to eliminate steps. Figure out what the goal of each step is. Is there an easier way to help accomplish this goal? Does the step even need to exist? A great tool for analyzing all the things in your library. So whether we know it or not, we're doing design work in libraries all the time. Design is just arranging something for a purpose. That's a vague definition, but one that is an appropriate one. So this was designed, even though it's kind of poorly designed, I think. We should be intentional about our design. This is an important aspect of it. Here's a quote from mid-century furniture designer Charles Eames. He says, "The role of the designer is that of a good host anticipating the needs of their guest." This is something that I think we can understand and get behind, right? We should be hospitable in our libraries. If you want to read more about the design process, this is a good book for it, The Art of Innovation by Tom Kelly. He lists this general process for doing design work, which I'll skip ahead and show you here. There are many different schools of design thinking, but they all basically have this general process. You need to understand a problem, you need to come up with a prototype, and this prototype can be on paper, it can be just sketches, that you can come up with potential solutions to a problem that you want to solve, and then you can implement what solution seems to be the best, but then circle back and evaluate it again, figure out how it's working or not, and this is a constant process of tweaking, improving, learning, and it's a really great methodology. You know, design does not have to be the genius with the black turtleneck in the corner, like smoking cigarettes and sketching in a notebook. Some design might happen that way, but it's this process that happens more often, and it's something that we can all get better at and practice. Okay, so just want to run through some better touch points in libraries here. Ran through earlier some slides of all that kind of ugly, horrible library stuff. Here are some examples of great library touch points. So here's the bad one again. Here's a quick redesign, right? A little bit better graphic design. It's got some library branding on there. It's positive rather than negative. Going from this to this is not very difficult. We're all capable of this with some practice, and it's pretty easy to redesign your signs to be polite in the long run. Real-world example of this that I loved. I was doing some work with the public library in Iowa City and saw this sign, and I thought, okay, I'm going to show them this sign, and you know, again, it's not great looking. It's kind of mean. It's not very cooperative. But they had redesigned the sign to this. Here, it's emphasizing help. Again, it's got some library branding. This is the library and library user as partners. This is adversarial. Is this like the hugest thing in the world? No, but all of these touch points add up, and this is indicative of a helpful mindset that can be applied across the whole library. Okay, so some more good library signage that I will just run through briefly because I like looking at pretty library things. If you're interested in library branding, check out the branding guidelines that Edmonton Public Library put out. They do a great job with their graphic design and talk about their personality and putting that out there in the community. More nice signage. I like the concept of zoning in libraries. And here's a nice example of a sign representing a zone. So certain behavior should happen over here, another thing can happen. More zoning signage. More zoning signage. Again, you can, if you want to examine these signs more and apply them to what you have going on, you can look at the slides later. Here's our prefab library website template again. San Rafael Library with a pretty nice library logo, even though you know, so many libraries have books as their logos because it's the easy solution, right? I guess because it's so easy and so typical, I would rather see other things besides a book in the library logo, but this one looks pretty nice. We help them put their logo on a bamboo library card, which is really a big hit with their users. Another nice library website, Addison Public Library, just a little bit south of you all in Illinois. And maybe pretty close to you to the west, I guess, Hennepin County Library. Really like their website and catalog because it is a seamless experience. There's no separation from a library user's point of view between being on the website and being on the catalog. And this item record does a nice job, or bib record, whatever, does a nice job hiding all the junk that library users don't want to see. Like, the library user in general probably doesn't need to see right away that there are 7 pages in the preface to this book, et cetera, et cetera. They can get that information if they want it, but instead we have some information that is more appealing. Book cover, title, easy way to place a hold. I like this library website. It's an academic library website, and it does a good job communicating what can be done on this site. I know I can find things, I can request things, there are services, there's a search box front and center. Good site. Check out warinc.org. Really great example of a library collecting community content and putting it online. Nice small service desks at NCSU's Hunt Library. No huge fortresses here, more collaborative workspaces. I like the concept of the everywhere is a desk library. Just like at the Apple Store where there's no one point of sale, how can we make our libraries more free and open to take care of any task anywhere? So those are some improved touch points. What about finding purpose? Let's just talk about MTV briefly. MTV does not show music videos anymore. They show really crummy reality TV, and apologies if you like any of their programs, no judgment here. But MTV music television does not show music videos anymore. They used to be like this, now they're like this. They have totally reinterpreted their mission. And I guess from my perspective, if MTV can not show music videos anymore, then libraries can do whatever the heck we want as well. So what kind of things can we do? I am interested in libraries maybe providing collections to things that people can't get elsewhere. So I bet some of you are doing this as well. Bakeware, kilowatt energy consumption devices, board games, all sorts of interesting things. Wi-Fi hotspots. Here's a library circulating a piece of land that you can grow food at the library. Can we take content from our community groups and help community groups connect to other people? What kind of experiences can we create in addition to the story time experiences? How can we add value to content by creating experiences like cookbook clubs, literary lots? Cleveland Public Library recreated storybooks in unused lots throughout Cleveland, and you could go tour the storybook. What kind of creation spaces can we make in our libraries? Library 10 here in Helsinki, there's a recording studio, there's a radio station, you can check out instruments. Brooklyn Public Library has invited artists and musicians into practice in their spaces. This guy, Chance the Rapper, he's a big hip-hop star now, and he cut his teeth and learned a lot at Chicago Public Library's U-Media program. Our space is a big strategic advantage. You do not need a cool green modern tree in your space, but I guess it wouldn't hurt. Here we have Oak Park Public Library and their idea box. If you're in the Chicagoland area, go stop by and see what they're doing. This is a experimental learning space that they change every so often. Here we have, they created a park during the winter, and they had a fountain, they had a bright light. It's just a nice way to create some warm and fuzzy feelings and learn about behavior. And you can go on their website too to see all the sorts of things that they do with their idea box. Really love this new library in Helsinki that's opening soon. They are going to have a sauna in the library. Now, I'm not expecting you to have a sauna in your library, but it's definitely contextually appropriate because of how important sauna is to the Finnish community, right? So what sorts of things are important to your community that might be unexpected in the library that you can integrate? Let's see, co-located libraries, good solution here. Anythink library, one of them is co-located with an elementary school and a theater. They're sharing space, and there's all sorts of good cross-pollination going on there. Here we have another Euro example of a library in a mall with a gym and offices and restaurant. How can we think of our spaces as this classic gymnasium floor where different things can happen at different times depending on the context? Here you can do basketball, tennis, wrestling, volleyball, badminton, right? we can make our spaces as flexible, I think. So co-working, we have the opportunity to help people work the way they want to work. Check out this video from Grand Valley State University in Steelcase. It is a great demonstration of how they learned about how students work and design spaces to support those needs. Ultimately, I want us to solve problems in our communities. So here we have the Homepage Cafe. This is a cafe and a library that employs people experiencing homelessness, helping solve the problem of homelessness in the library. Cool thing. We're seeing more and more of this. Social workers in libraries, public health nurse in libraries. You can pick up helpful groceries at the library in Baltimore that you've ordered online. Co-located, the Vancouver Public Library and YWCA, single mothers and their kids living at the library, essentially. Amazing. Here we have a library outside of Malmö in Sweden that opened up and it was empty. They call it the Garage Library, and their first task was to co-create with the community to figure out what the space needed to be. We should be community experts. We need to know a lot about our communities. We need to have that outward focus and ask those questions about what people need, so we can be important to our host ecosystems. So we've got a lot of stuff to do in libraries. I think we sort of need to get off the hamster wheel of circulation statistics and learn to tell the library story in a different way. This library UX stuff is nothing totally new. Here we have a quote from 1903 from Gracia Alta Countryman. She worked for Hennepin County. And here we have great words about taking down restrictions, taking down bars, putting people face-to-face, hospitality. I love this quote. You know, this is one of my library UX mantras for sure. Everything that people do in libraries is impacting the user experience, all these decisions that we're making. So if we keep this in the front of our mind, we can move towards creating better experiences. So I want to kind of leave us with this thought. We have this our universal logo. It's great, but you know, we do more. It's just one person reading alone. Here's my reinterpretation that I think is maybe a bit more descriptive of what we're doing in libraries, hopefully. And I want to leave you with this thought that I hope you and everyone you work with take your role seriously as a user experience librarian, and think about the implications of your decisions and create good experiences. Okay, that was a lot of slides, but we have some time for questions now. So questions or comments?
Thank you, Aaron. That was a lot of slides, and my head is spinning just sitting here, but all with good stuff. Okay. I had a question come in from Rachel, and she asks, we are buying new self-checks next year and want to evaluate placing them differently to boost users, but we only want to place them one time. Journey maps of our existing placement may reveal why some get used and some don't, but how do I prove this with the journey map?
Well, I think, okay, so a couple things here. Great idea. I like this. And with doing some journey mapping and watching people use the self-check machines, you can learn a lot. And to me, the proof is sort of the data. I mean, if you gather data and you see, you know, 75% of people using self-check machine that's located in one spot and 25% of people using the other one, well then, like, maybe it makes sense to put both machines where there are more people. I mean, that would just be one example. So I think there is some interpretation that's necessary with the data, but to me, looking at the data will lead you to potential responses to that. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but to me, the proof is sort of the data. It's hard to argue with the data, even though there are interpretations you'll need to make. Now, and I also want to say, I do realize that it's maybe easier to place them in the correct spot the first time, and it's probably cheaper to provide power to them and wire them up or whatever. But if there is any way you can do a temporary installation at first, think about if you can do that. That way you can do a temporary installation, then do some observations, learn from that, and then either finalize it or adjust based on what you've learned.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. I hope that answered your question. And again, I want to assure all of you that all of the resources, the handouts, the slides will be shared on our website later, and that will be in your follow-up email to this webinar. Lori says, you showed a slide of rankings, space, and other things. Is that in your book or on your website somewhere?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That was part of the book. I'll see if I can pull this up. Maybe this is the slide you're talking about. Yeah, this is these are screen grabs from the book. This is so in the back of the book, there's just all the checkpoints listed like this.
Yes, she said that's it.
Great.
Great. Thank you for showing that. Another question I have is, so as I mentioned, Aaron, I work for a library system, and we serve like 42 libraries in our system. And a lot of times when we're trying to get feedback on how to serve our libraries, we've tried to get away from asking, you know, what do you want? Hey, libraries, what do you want? And instead, when we're working on a new project, what we'll do is maybe come up with some ideas first, and then share those ideas with them, and then get their feedback. Do you see this guiding process as a good idea, or do you think we're skewing things too much? Because we tend to not get a lot of good feedback when we just use that open-ended, what do you want? So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you know, I think that providing some constraints in that scenario and providing some options for them to vote on makes sense to me. But you could also ask follow-up questions about each option that might help you gather more information, like about if they're actually going to use this stuff or not. Like, what problem would this solve in your library? How do you see this being implemented, or how do you see this working in your library? Stuff like that. But yes, both those scenarios is a little bit tough. You know, on a deeper level, and again, I know this is much harder to do, but is there a way that you can learn about the libraries, your member libraries, and extrapolate from there and come up with new solutions?
Okay.
Rather than just relying on surveys and focus groups.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Thank you. So do you have any, we're just about out of time, do you have any parting words, I guess, for libraries? Like you said, we're all user design experience librarians, but for people who are more just starting to think about these concepts, where's a good place to start? Because you shared a lot of great information, and I could understand if people would get overwhelmed. So where do we start with that?
Sure. So I guess start like this. I really do think that starting with the Service Safari is a great way to do it, and to start being mindful and observe experiences that you are enjoying or not enjoying. So if you do this and some of your colleagues do this, it can really turn you on to the experiences that you are providing in your library. And so I do think that just becoming more mindful about how things are designed and asking the question why they are the way they are is a great way forward. So download those PDFs about Service Safaris and start from there, perhaps, is a nice way. Also, maybe just with the UX partners and getting some fresh perspective on your library. Those would be good 2 first steps.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron, for a great presentation and all of this information. As I mentioned, all of the resources will be available on our website later today. You will get a link to that. I also want to mention we do have a webinar coming up in a week and a half on November 15th. We also have one coming up in December, which you can find on our website. So again, thank you, Aaron, for the presentation. Thank you to all of you who are listening in today. I'm sure you received a ton of information on where to get started. So I'm going to sign off here. Thanks again, Aaron. Thanks to all of you. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, can enjoy some of this nice weather, and have a great rest of your week. So long.